My boss gave credit for my project to his nephew and promoted him, so I quietly took the offer from our rival company, then outbid them for their biggest client. I've never been the kind of person who needed praise to keep going. Quiet grinding has always been my thing. Get in early, leave late, do the job better than anyone else, and keep your head down. But let me tell you, when someone takes credit for your work and you watch them get rewarded while you fade into the background, that changes you. That breaks something. And sometimes, when something breaks, you stop playing nice. My name's Dev. I'm 29, a software architect by trade, and for the last 4 years, I worked at a mid-sized tech firm in Chicago. I won't name them, but if you're in the city and your company uses proprietary customer behavior analytics, you've probably used something I helped build. When I first joined the company, I didn't even have a desk. Literally, I was part of a temporary hire wave during a project rush. I worked off a bar stool in the kitchen for 3 weeks before they finally figured out seating. Still, I loved it. The pace, the problems, the people, at least most of them. But then there was Jason. Jason was our director of product, the kind of guy who never knew how to code but could talk in big, meaningless phrases like synergize vertical solutions and somehow convince executives he was a visionary. He wasn't terrible at his job, exactly, he just never did much. And he had one defining trait: nepotism. Big on it. Every quarter or so, someone with his last name or close to it would show up as a strategic hire. Enter his nephew, Logan. Logan was fine. You know the type. Ivy League kid with a communications degree who thought learning to use Excel made him a genius. Loud, confident, always circling back and just touching base. He joined as a product analyst, but very quickly started inserting himself into engineering meetings, asking questions that didn't make sense and pitching innovative ideas, like turning every user interface into a chatbot. I didn't think much of it at first. Then came the project. It was a huge upgrade to our analytics dashboard, something I've been quietly working on for months in the background, piecing together code and proposing UX improvements no one had touched since 2016. I'd built a prototype, stress-tested it, and submitted a full dev plan to Jason. He replied with, "Great work. Let's workshop this with Logan." I didn't love the idea, but fine. Maybe Logan could help with copywriting or presentation slides. What I didn't expect was for him to take the entire pitch deck I built, change the font, and present it as his own in the executive quarterly. Worse? Jason backed him up. "Logan's been spearheading this initiative," he said, right to the CTO's face. I was sitting there across the table, stunned. No one blinked. No one even looked in my direction. 3 weeks later, Logan got promoted to Associate Director of Innovation. I got a pizza party and a coffee mug. That was the week something inside me started to shift. I went home that Friday, poured myself a drink, and stared at the mug on my desk that said, "Teamwork makes the dream work." I wanted to throw it through the wall. Instead, I started updating my resume. What people at work didn't know was that I had been getting feelers from other companies for a while, quiet inquiries from recruiters. I'd always turned them down because I liked the team. But now, that loyalty had a shelf life. One message stood out. A firm across town, let's call them Rivitech, had been gunning to expand their data division. The recruiter said they'd heard of me through a former teammate who now worked there. They didn't just want to interview me, they wanted to build a new vertical around my work. So I set up a call, then another, and before long, I had a written offer that doubled my salary and gave me full creative freedom over a new architecture platform. I didn't quit immediately. I had one more thing to do. There was a client, our biggest one, Fortune 500. They accounted for nearly 30% of our firm's revenue. I had been working with their back-end systems for 2 years and knew their pain points better than anyone else at our company, including Jason and his golden boy nephew. I knew that if I played it right, I could take them with me. So I stayed. Just a few more weeks. I nodded along when Jason presented Logan as the brain behind our latest success. I helped Logan workshop his next roadmap deck. I gave quiet advice in the background and pretended I was over it. But at night, I was working with Rivitech to build a pitch that would blow them out of the water. I was done being quiet. I was done being walked over. And I wasn't just leaving. I was going to make sure they felt it. The offer from Rivitech sat in my inbox for a week. I stared at it between meetings, reread it while collaborating with Logan, and memorized every detail before I made my move. It wasn't just the salary, though. Let's be real. It was double what I was making. It was the validation. They didn't just want me to join their team. They wanted to build something with me, from the ground up. Still, I couldn't walk out the door without tying up one very important loose end. The client. We'll call them Stratacor. They were a massive logistics company that had recently started leaning heavily into analytics, and our firm had scored a multi-year contract with them thanks in large part to my architecture. The system I developed gave them real-time data visualization that helped save them millions in operational waste. It was my baby, and I knew it better than anyone, definitely better than Jason, who showed up to only one of the weekly meetings and once referred to their CTO as the IT guy. And because of that, I knew their pain points. One Friday afternoon, I pinged my main contact at Stratacor, Mina, on Slack. We'd built up a pretty solid rapport over 2 years. She was direct, sharp, and no nonsense. I asked if she had time for a quick sync, off the record. No sales pitch, just a conversation. She replied, "Sure. You okay?" We hopped on Zoom later that evening. No office background. Just two professionals talking from their living rooms, over the sound of my dishwasher and her kid watching cartoons in the background. I didn't hold back. I told her, carefully but clearly, that I was considering leaving. I told her I couldn't say where yet, but that I had a vision for a platform that would directly address a bunch of the limitations we've been hitting with our current setup. I told her the truth. I wasn't looking to steal clients. I was looking to solve real problems, the right way this time. She listened, quietly, asked a few technical questions, and then she said something that stuck with me. "I always knew the innovation came from you, not them." She didn't promise anything. She couldn't. But the tone changed. The possibility opened. And that was all I needed. The following Monday, I handed in my 2 weeks' notice. Jason looked stunned. "You're leaving?" "No." He glanced around like someone else might step in and stop me. "Yep," I said. "Appreciate the opportunity." Logan looked confused, but tried to play it cool. "Hope you land somewhere good, man." I wanted to laugh. I really did. But I just smiled. That last week was weird. Suddenly, I was getting attention from higher-ups who hadn't spoken to me in months. People started dropping by my desk with awkward goodbyes, like they realized too late that I had been the engine behind half the work they took for granted. Jason called me into his office on my last day and asked if I'd consider consulting for them on the side. I said sorry. The company I'm joining has a pretty strict exclusivity clause. He nodded like he understood. But I could see it, the twitch in his jaw, the realization that something bigger was happening. 3 weeks into Rivitech, I was already designing the core infrastructure of our new analytics platform. I brought on 2 engineers I'd worked with before, ones who'd been overlooked just like I had. We worked late. We worked weekends. But it didn't feel like labor. It felt like freedom. And then, Mina called. She said Stratacor's leadership was reviewing vendor contracts. Their exec team wasn't happy with our old firm's lack of innovation, especially since I'd left. She asked if we'd be willing to submit a formal proposal. I didn't hesitate. We drafted a killer pitch, one that addressed every frustration Stratacor had ever voiced. Clean UX, more transparent data control, scalable modules, and above all, real accountability. When I clicked send on that proposal, I felt the shift. A month later, we got the contract. I didn't just leave my old company, I gutted them. Took their biggest client. With a 2-month-old startup team and a vision they never respected enough to listen to. I heard from an ex-coworker that when the news hit, Jason had a meltdown in a board meeting. Logan tried to blame everyone but himself. My name came up a lot, apparently, and not fondly. But I was busy. Too busy, really, to celebrate. Until the email came. It was from Logan. No subject line, just one sentence. "So I guess you think you won." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I did. I replied, "You're mistaking silence for surrender. I never stopped building. You just stopped paying attention." No follow-up. He didn't respond. Funny thing is, I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just finished. Like I'd finally closed the chapter they wrote me out of. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because an even bigger opportunity was coming, and this time, I would be the one giving the promotion. Rivitech was everything my last company wasn't. No dead weight, no boardroom performatives, no nepotism. We were small, sharp, and fast. The first few months felt like sprinting with my lungs full of oxygen for the first time. Every person in that office pulled their weight, and for once, I wasn't being managed, I was being trusted. We weren't playing office politics. We were building. By the 3rd month, we had onboarded Stratacor and 2 new clients, smaller logistics firms that had heard through the grapevine that the brains behind the Stratacor upgrade had jumped ship. Word got around fast in our niche. especially when that word came with results. One day, I got a message from our CEO, Angela. She was a former engineer turned leader, the kind of person who remembered what it was like to troubleshoot code at 2 a.m. She asked me to join a new initiative, a formal pitch for a Fortune 100 transportation company. Let's call them Northridge. It was a long shot. They were massive. Our previous clients were mid-tier compared to them. But Angela believed we had a shot if we could prove two things: that our system outperformed the legacy stacks by measurable margins, that we had the right people leading the charge. In other words, we needed not just good tech, we needed a good story. And that's where it got interesting, because Northridge had recently been approached by my former company. And yes, Jason and Logan were the ones leading the pitch on their end. I didn't know this until midway through a planning meeting when Angela, with a straight face, said, "Guess who else is gunning for the same contract?" and shared their proposal summary. I recognized the formatting. Jason always used the same PowerPoint template with navy and silver bars. Logan's slide notes were full of buzzwords like synergy, real-time enablement, and next-gen capacity unlock. I felt something in me stir. Not rage, something sharper. Focus. Because now it was personal. Angela leaned over the table and said, "I know there's a story here. If we win this, I want to win loudly." So we built the most brutally specific proposal I've ever worked on. We didn't just say we could beat the legacy systems, they showed how, slide by slide. Case studies, performance metrics, simulated demos. We included screenshots from our StrataCore deployment, anonymized but unmistakably superior to anything they'd touched in years. The night before the presentation, I barely slept. I sat in my apartment, looking at old Slack screenshots, messages I'd sent to Jason about system upgrades, his one-word replies, Logan's copy-paste pitches that pulled directly from my planning docs. I wasn't nostalgic. I was remembering, fueling. The day of the pitch, the Northridge team walked in, 5 execs, 2 analysts, and a director who used to work with Jason's firm. I recognized her. She didn't recognize me. Good. Angela introduced me as our lead systems architect and the designer of StrataCore's award-winning data overhaul. That turned heads. One of the analysts opened his mouth like he wanted to say something but stopped himself. I stepped up and spoke clearly, calmly. I wasn't selling hype. I was walking them through a blueprint of everything their current system failed to do and how we'd fix it. I answered every question without blinking. At one point, someone asked how our solution compared to Jason's firm's offering. I smiled and said, "I wrote the back end of that system before they repackaged it. I can show you how to improve it because I know exactly where it breaks." Angela kicked me under the table, gently. But it was worth it. We finished the pitch, thanked them for their time, and walked out of that room feeling electric. 3 days later, we got the call. We didn't just win the contract. We beat them by name. Northridge had rejected their bid, citing lack of specificity, poor technical depth, and no innovation roadmap. They forwarded us the decision memo. Jason's team had been described as relying on recycled solutions and buzzwords. Logan, specifically, was called out as inexperienced and redundant. I saved the document, not to gloat, just to remember. 2 weeks later, Angela called a company-wide meeting, not just to announce the win, but to announce my promotion. Director of Data Systems. I stared at the screen when she said it. Everyone clapped, and I felt my hands tremble just a little. Not because of the title, but because I had been dismissed for so long that it didn't feel real. Until it was. That night, I got another email from Logan. Subject, "Wow." Message, "Hope it was worth burning bridges." I didn't reply, because bridges aren't worth much if they only take you back to where you started. Still, I saved that email too, because I wasn't done yet. Jason's firm had one more client, one that I knew inside and out. And I wasn't going to chase them. I was going to make them come to me. It was a Thursday when the final nail started forming. Not hammering in yet, but I felt the steel. The company Jason worked for had one remaining client that gave them relevance in our sector, Eon Tech, a logistics-adjacent startup with big funding, bloated ambitions, and terrible systems integration. I knew because I consulted on it. Briefly, before Jason passed me over to Logan and cut the scope of my work in half so his nephew could take over. Logan fumbled that contract so badly the Eon Tech team had to hire an independent dev crew just to untangle the back-end spaghetti he left behind. But somehow, Jason's firm still held the contract. I didn't think much about Eon Tech until Mina from StrataCore pinged me again. She'd heard through a mutual contact that Eon Tech was shopping around. Unofficially, She forwarded me a vague job posting from Eon Tech looking for a strategic systems migration partner. In corporate, that's code for, we're getting ready to dump someone but don't want it on the books yet. I texted Angela. She replied with one word, let's move. Over the next 2 weeks, we pulled out all the stops. Not flash, substance. My parents told everyone I got into college through read their customer service logs, scraped public Git commits for patterns, looked for every crack in their current infrastructure. Then, I drafted a proposal that did what Jason's firm never managed to do. Speak directly to Eon Tech's core mission, not just their pain points. We talked scalability in human language. We framed our platform in the context of their own growth projections. I even included a timeline mapping out the migration in stages, down to the sprint. No bait. No jargon. Just delivery. We sent it through an internal contact who owed me a favor, and within a week, Eon Tech reached out, formally. They wanted a meeting. It was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I didn't eat the night before. I just sat up on my couch staring at my old company's website, the faces still smiling on the leadership page. Logan was now listed as Chief Innovation Officer. I barked out a laugh. Even their titles were inflated. Tuesday came. Angela and I stepped into the glass conference room at Eon Tech headquarters like we belonged there. Because by now we did. There were 5 people on the other side of the table, and I recognized 2 of them from the days I used to do grunt work for Jason. One of them, Lauren, the tech ops lead, did a double take when she saw me. You used to work for Branix, she said. I did, I replied. Until they stopped letting me work. Her mouth twitched. I couldn't tell if it was a smile or a warning, but I leaned into it. I was brought in originally to fix what they'd broken. That scope changed. So I left. And since then, I've helped migrate 3 companies like yours in half the time and with double the performance outcomes. We walked them through the plan. The tone shifted after the second slide. Questions stopped being polite and started being serious. Engagement meant interest. I could feel it. At one point, Lauren said, if this actually works, it could cut our churn rate by 15%. I said, 15 is conservative. But yes. When the meeting wrapped, the lead systems engineer shook my hand and said, we'll be in touch. Angela and I walked out into the sunlight feeling the way I used to feel walking off a stage, still humming from the spotlight, unsure whether it was nerves or power. 2 weeks later, we got the call. They were switching. It was official. We'd taken the last big account Jason's firm had. Angela took the team out for drinks, but I stayed late at the office. I opened up my old company's homepage again. They'd removed Stratacor from their Client Success section. Then Northridge. Now Eon Tech. The site looked empty, like a shell. And I sat there thinking about the way Jason used to talk down to me in meetings, how Logan used my decks word for word and got applause, how they once told me to focus on support-level work because vision was above my pay grade. So I sent an email, not to Jason, not to Logan, to the VP of Business Operations at their firm. Subject, a professional courtesy. Body, hello. As of this week, your organization has lost all 3 of its largest accounts, Stratacor, Northridge, and now Eon Tech, to our firm. Each of these clients cited outdated systems, lack of innovation, and leadership stagnation as reasons for the switch. As the architect of those transitions, I offer this not as mockery, but clarity. The market remembers where value comes from. All the best. R. I never got a reply. But I didn't need one. A week later, LinkedIn told me Logan had updated his status to exploring new opportunities. Jason disappeared off the company page. No announcement. No press release. Just gone. Some people say revenge is petty. Maybe. But when you've spent years being invisible in rooms you carried on your back, sometimes justice just looks like being seen. And now? Everyone saw me. It was a Wednesday when I found out Jason was officially out. No LinkedIn update. No statement. Just a quiet disappearance from the leadership page and a vague mention from someone in the industry that he was taking time off. Logan's exit was less graceful. He posted a farewell message on LinkedIn filled with empty platitudes about pursuing growth and lessons learned. It got maybe a dozen likes. I clicked on his profile out of curiosity. He'd added Innovation Strategist as his headline, which felt both ironic and sad, considering his strategy had always been to repurpose other people's ideas and pretend they were his. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. What I felt was closer to peace. Not the kind you get from silence, but the kind that comes from being heard after years of shouting into the void. But the story wasn't quite over. About 3 weeks after Eon Tech officially signed with us, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. It was Tyler, one of the only decent guys left at my old company. A project manager I used to work with. "Hey," he said, sounding sheepish. "So there's talk that you were behind the Eon Tech migration in Stratacore and Northridge." I didn't confirm or deny it. Just said, "Why do you ask?" He paused. "Because people are finally starting to ask questions about what really happened, about why Jason promoted Logan instead of you, about who actually built what." I leaned back in my chair, heart quiet, and I asked, and everyone kind of knows now. He didn't say it, but I heard it in the silence. They knew who the talent was. They knew who the frauds were. And most importantly, they knew they'd chosen wrong. Tyler ended the call with a question. "Would you ever come back?" "Maybe not here, but, if the right people were in charge." I didn't hesitate. "No," I said. "I already built what I needed, and I didn't need their permission." A few months later, Angela made me the face of a new campaign for Rivitech's talent pipeline. She wanted to highlight people who had been underestimated, people who didn't look the part, sound the part, or play the game, but had the brains to change it all. We shot a short video in our office. I spoke directly into the camera. I was told I was too quiet to lead, too technical to innovate, too back-end to be client-facing. But systems don't care how loud you are. They care if you work. I was given limitations. I turned them into specs. I was denied credit. I built my own portfolio. And now? I'm hiring the people they overlooked. The video went viral. Well, in our corner of the industry. It sparked a quiet storm of DMs, emails, and anonymous messages. Some from people I used to work with. Others from folks who'd been similarly dismissed, overlooked, written off. The best message came from someone I didn't expect. It was from Mina. She messaged me to say, "You probably don't remember me, but we interned together at Stratacore years ago. I always admired how you carried yourself. Quiet, but sharp. I left the field after Jason shot down one of my early pitches in front of the whole floor. But watching your story made me think maybe it's time to come back." I did remember her. She'd been brilliant, had this knack for UX that made things feel intuitive, not just look good. I offered her a job. She starts next month. A few days ago, I went back into an old drive to clean things out. I found the original proposal I wrote, the one Jason borrowed and rebranded under Logan's name. I opened the document, read the lines I had poured hours into, and scrolled to the comment thread. Logan's comments were still there, from years ago. Too technical. Too niche. Let's add a buzzword here. I laughed. Buzzwords don't build systems. People do. Real ones. The ones who stay late fixing code that others break. The ones who get passed over because they aren't flashy. The ones who don't need a spotlight to function but deserve it anyway. I closed the document and deleted it. I didn't need it anymore. The last time I saw Jason in person was at a conference. He was sitting alone, looking smaller than I remembered. No entourage. No badge of honor. Just a man in a fading suit, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at his phone. I walked past him on my way to speak at a panel. One of the organizers stopped me and said, "Hey, we bumped you up to keynote. You're drawing a crowd." Jason looked up. Our eyes met for a second. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. Because the thing about building your name the hard way is this: you don't need to announce it. By the time they realize who you are, it's already too late.